Alrighty, we welcome in today the Edmonton Oilers play-by-play man. He's great at what he does, has the pleasure of watching the best player in the world play night in, night out. Jack Michaels, thanks for coming to the podcast today, Jack.
Thanks for having me. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Off to a sensational start this year, kind of set the tone for everyone else, and he's getting lots of help around him, that's for sure.
Yeah, he hasn't got any worse, let's put it that way. Jack, first off, how are things with you? What's going on? What's new? Obviously, the team was on a road trip or kind of had some downtime there. So, what's up and what's new?
You know what? Really, to be honest with you, it's been smooth sailing so far. As you can imagine, the team's great. I was on the road. This was the first time I've been on the road in quite some time. Did all the games remote last year. There's still going to be some games that I do remote this year, but it was real nice to feel some sense of normalcy. I mean, the buildings were mostly full, and for the most part, it's starting to feel somewhat normal. There's still, as you can imagine, quite a few things that are different. Vegas, they still have masks everywhere indoors. Arizona's completely open, so that felt completely normal. But yeah, it was nice to feel like we're getting a little bit closer to what it used to be.
So Jack, I want to backtrack a little bit here. How did Jack Michaels come from a small town in Pennsylvania known as Meadville, approximately 13,000 people, end up in Edmonton?
20,000 when I grew up.
I know. I was going off Wikipedia. So, how did you end up in Edmonton calling games for, in my opinion, the greatest team on earth?
Well, I don't know how many segments we were going to do, but this is certainly one that takes me back. I mean, it's a long, winding road. I was, not necessarily, certainly not a hockey player. Wasn't even really a fan until the Penguins started to get, respectable in the late 80s. And that was shortly after they drafted Mario Lemieux in 1984. And, quickly realized, as most of us frustrated announcers do when we're 16 or 17, that my future was going to be talking about sports, not necessarily participating in them. And you know what? Hockey became kind of an afterthought when I was first doing this for first in college. We only had a club hockey team, and then even after college, my first professional gig, I was mostly focused on doing college basketball, football, baseball. That's what I grew up following and watching. But you know what? I found that I had a certain talent at doing hockey. That turned out to be my first pro job. A team in Colorado Springs that's no longer in existence came calling. And all of a sudden I found myself in a much different lane than I thought I'd be. And just got really, fortunate that when Edmonton hired for the job, they didn't have a preset formula for finding a replacement for the great Rod Phillips, a Hall of Famer. As I understand, he basically raised his hand when it was time to find a job for the old team in the WHA. So they had no process. They were looking at anyone and everyone. And I was just lucky that they were open-minded enough to consider some guy who at that point was working in Alaska and actually moved south to Anchorage, south from Anchorage to Edmonton, if you can believe that. So, that's the Coles notes of it. A lot of hard work in there. But also quite a bit of fortune.
So, Jack, I want to talk about your first NHL game. Where was it, and how was the game? But also, even talk about the preparation that you do. I mean, obviously, we know what players do. I coach hockey. I know what my guys do for a game. What do you do in particular? As far as notes or highlights, and what are you doing from morning to night for a game?
Well, I mean, first off, my first game ever was at Rexall Place at that time. It was the old building, the old Northlands Coliseum, and it was a Battle of Alberta game on a Saturday night. Jordan Eberle scored his first National Hockey League goal that night, and Steve McIntyre knocked out Rytis Evans. And so, the Oilers won 4-0, and I think I remember leaving the parking lot thinking the Oilers might go 79-3 or something like that. I mean, they looked unbeatable. It was quite a night. I'll always remember it. If you look up that goal to this day, it's on a lot of highlights. He had a nice little move around Mark Giordano, I think it was, and then a knockout. I mean, we all like to see a fight every once in a while, and that was certainly one that I'll never forget. But day in, day out, I have a scorebook. I've probably got one sitting around here. Hold on a second.
All right.
Yeah, no, that's all good. I'll just quickly grab something from the files here.
Well, good. It's a good thing you're wearing pants, Jack. So good.
Yeah, nothing official here, but yeah, I'll do a chart like this for every game. That's the opponent. I think this looks like an old Columbus Blue Jacket lineup. And then I've got scorebooks for every season I've ever called games. And if you look at this nightmare, on the left there is the lineups for that game. And then on the right is scoring summary, other notes, power play numbers. This was only a 2-1 game, so not really that interesting. But we go a little deeper here. Yeah, we go a little deeper here. If it gets high scoring, there's the famous, if I'm known for one call, it's the whole Battle of Alberta. There's that game, 8-3. That was the goalie fight and all that stuff. So yeah, and I mean, as you could probably tell there, I've got, more notes than I can possibly use for a game. But if I've learned one thing, in this business, and this goes for any test you take if you're a kid or any project that's worth doing, I'd rather have all this knowledge and notes at a drop of a hat and not need it than need it and not have it. And so that's the biggest thing about preparation, that if I lean on any one expression, that would be it.
Preparation.
Better to have it and not not have it.
So I'm wondering, with all those notes that you have from game logs, do you still have the one when you're doing color with Steven Tyler from Aerosmith? The last Aces?
Yeah, I had. That was I think 2000. That might have been 06, 07 season up in Anchorage, Alaska. He was dating a girl from Anchorage. I think he might still be in a relationship with her. But he came up and he was at the game, and I think one of our owners, who was a bit of a, he was always into, meeting the celebs and everything. I think he horse collared him for me and brought him up to the booth, and he ended up doing a full period with me. So that was, that was kind of neat. In the minors, I also did a game with Bill Clement, who used to be kind of a rock star on ESPN back when ESPN first had the National Hockey League rights in the States. Also, of course, a great former Philadelphia Flyer. So yeah, I've worked with some interesting people. Steven Tyler would certainly be on that list.
And now you got to work with Stauffer.
Yeah, some would say it's a drop down. Some would say it's a step up, depending on your 1970s rock preference, I guess.
All right, Jack, I want to talk some hockey here. NHL, what are you liking so far? What are you disliking? Obviously, the Oilers are off to a great start, but let's further that. What other teams are catching your eye? And yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I mean, Florida, I think, showed signs of explosiveness last year. They've got a Hall of Fame coach in Joel Quenneville. They've had talent for years. It's starting to come together in a big way over Q. I mean, here's a guy who's won 3 Stanley Cups. I still believe he's the active coach with the most cups right now. So, why wouldn't you like Florida? I mean, even going in, the question with Florida is always going to be, their goaltending and what kind of season, can they get over the course of a long haul? Can Bobrovsky ever live up to that contract? And if not, which is probably the answer, can he at least give them 1 or 2 great seasons like he managed in Columbus? And most importantly, can he do it in the playoffs? He's got a very poor record in the postseason, but the Panthers are very good. They've got two of the most underrated players in the game, and Sasha Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau. They've got some pillars on the back end. I mean, they've got the number 1 overall pick from a few years back on the back end, and Aaron Ekblad. I mean, a lot of these guys have either been forgotten or just aren't thought of because they play in a non-traditional market. This isn't the NFL. This isn't the Miami Dolphins. This is the Florida Panthers in the National Hockey League, and their relevance has been very sporadic over the course of the years. But right now they're in a spike of both talent and coaching, and it's come together at the right time for them. And again, who knows what's going to happen over the next 77 games, but they certainly were a team, and they gave Tampa some problems in the first round. I think they had them 2-1. Or something like that. They were in that series, and they just didn't get any stops. So I've always felt if Florida's goaltending ever catches up with some of its talent at the other positions, they could give people problems. The biggest surprise for me, if we're talking about who am I genuinely surprised at, is teams like San Jose at 4-1. I'll be curious to see what some of these, and I didn't expect Colorado to get off to the kind of slow start they've gotten off to. I think Vegas, I do understand that. I mean,
well, they're missing Pacioretty and Stone, I guess, with injuries,
and Alex Tuck, and Alec Martinez. I mean, they're down some folks, and the biggest thing with Vegas, I'm sorry, but this is always something I argue about with Bob Stauffer. Marc-Andre Fleury casts as big a shadow as anyone in the entire National Hockey League when he's on your roster. Look at what Matt Murray did with Marc-Andre Fleury on the roster. Now, granted, Marc-Andre Fleury didn't win all those games in 16 and 17, but he won some of them. And then look at what happened right after Fleury left for Vegas to Matt Murray's game. Look, I mean, you can't tell me there's a coincidence. So now, Robin Leonard, another guy who's had a lot of success, certainly looked good in Vegas, but now he's not even there a year, and the backbone of that team leaves. Not just in net, not just the Vezina guy, but the backbone of that whole organization. You combine that with some – I think there's some deficiencies down the middle. Vegas – I'm a little surprised they're 1-4. They're certainly beat up. There's certainly time for them to restore themselves. But for me, the biggest question on that Vegas roster was always how they were going to deal without Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah.
So let's flip the coin there. I'm a diehard Oilers fan living in Regina, Saskatchewan. Drew doesn't have a favorite team. Did you see the Oilers starting off 5-0?
I thought their schedule was favorable this year. I mean, if you look at it, 7 of their first 10 are at home. They get Arizona, on the road, which is really, one of the poorest teams on paper I've seen in a while. Now, Andre Tourigny might very well, get that team playing, but on paper, they've got some real issues. Vegas, we talked about, had a plethora of injuries. Anaheim is not expected to contend for a playoff spot, though they were dangerous. So could I have seen, Edmonton start 5-0? Yeah, I could see Edmonton start the season 8-1-1 for that matter. They've got a pretty favorable schedule here. I mean, they're now in a stretch where they're going to play 2 games in 9 days. Philadelphia and Vancouver. They're going to be the favorite in both of those games.
Right.
Yeah.
Then they get on the road, and some would say the first game that the Oilers are not going to be the betting favorite in, and let's face it, the betting sites are now prominent in sports. It's probably going to be at Boston. And what is that? That's 10 games in.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not that shocked. This is the second time in 3 years they're 5-0. I think, certainly the third time in 6 years that they're off to this kind of start. Remember, they started 7-1 the year they went to the second round in 2017. So I'm not really that surprised what the Oilers are doing. But I think to a man, and certainly Connor McDavid's tone today indicated as such, they're more interested in what they're doing 20 games from now than they are right now. You know, right now everything's great, but we'll see where we're at in a couple weeks when they get out on the road, have some real travel, and have some difficult teams to be with. Winning at Boston, at St. Louis, they start to get through those games and they come home from that 5-game trip, which finishes up in Winnipeg at something like 10-1-1. Then you've got something. Then you've got reason to think this could be one hell of a season.
I could start planning the parade at that point.
Well, the biggest thing is, and I know you're half kidding there, but the biggest thing for the Oilers right now is they're in a rare spot where I think they've got enough players on their team that recognize the regular season, while important, is ultimately an exercise to a means to an end.
Right.
In other words, they're not going to tell you that, they're going to tell you that the game in January means something. They're going to tell you that the game in March means something. But I think all of them know that the real season begins in late April. This is going to be a playoff team. And I would have said that before they started 5-0. This is going to be a playoff team. The way their division is, the way their conference is, they should be no worse than second in the Pacific, if not winning their first division title. What would it be, since 1987? I mean, that's the longest drought. I think that's the longest drought in professional sports. I think there's a team that just won last in '88, and it might be an NBA team. But no, that's just the appetizer. For this team to consider any season a real success, and I'm talking about the guts of the club, the McDavids, the Draisaitl, the nurses, they're going to want significant progress in the postseason. And what I think that means is ultimately a trip to at least the conference final. Mm-hmm. And that's a harsh grade when you're talking about anything shy of that being, a season that ultimately doesn't live up to expectations. But I also think it's somewhat healthy to think that way, because this club is no longer a young hockey club.
Right. 5
of their 60 have played at least 7 years in the league. Their forwards are all young, but experienced young. I mean, Zach Hyman is south of 30, but he's got miles on him. McDavid, Draisaitl played, years 6 and 7. This isn't a young team anymore. This is a team that understands the windows right now.
And what it takes to win.
I was going to say we got Nuge too, who hasn't aged since he started his first game in the NHL, but
he's in the league 11 years now, believe it or not.
Hard to believe.
I mean, this is not a young team anymore. And you know what? I'll just say this. I mean, right now they think they have what it takes to win. But you can't say they know what it takes to win, because they just haven't done it yet. But that's the proving ground. That's why I say that I think the one thing about this team is it's mature enough to realize, hey, 50 wins, division title would be great in the regular season, but it's not going to matter much unless you're, negotiating your way through a couple rounds of the playoffs. I think, for this team, anything shy of a conference final, and I think the players would tell you it'd be a disappointment.
So do you got any inside information for our Oiler fans out here about Mike Smith?
Mike Smith skated before practice today. He was still in kind of tracksuit situation. He will not play Wednesday, I believe, but he's got a shot to play Saturday in Vancouver. So I guess, what it amounts to is about a 10 to 14 day injury max.
Do we see Skinner play Wednesday night, or are they going to go back to Koskinen?
I would suspect it'd be Mikko. I mean, why wouldn't you? He was rock solid in the 2 games. And the fact of the matter is the goaltending rotation is going to be Smith, Koskinen, not Koskinen, Skinner. So the focus isn't going to be, well, let's give the kid another start just for the heck of it. Yeah. Dave Tippett's about winning games and establishing a position for the teams that are going to be on his roster long-term this season. And that guy is Mikko Koskinen, not Stuart Skinner. So if Smith can't go Saturday, I'd expect your rotation to be Koskinen Wednesday, Koskinen Saturday.
Jack, I want to ask Connor McDavid, where do you see him in the numbers selection? Obviously, it's a team game, but the way he plays and how good he is, he's so dominant. Over under 154 points, and then also to follow that question, any early season projections for Cup winners? I mean, you got to say the Oilers, obviously, because you worked for the team. But who else do you got?
Well, I mean, before the season, I would have said under 154 points. I think I had him around 130. I am hedging. I'm hedging. I'm still gonna say under 154 though. If that's my number, I'm gonna say under. I am not overwhelmingly confident about that prediction, but I would still say under. As far as how I see the league, I mean, I have to say, I still think it's going to be Edmonton, Colorado in the West. And in the East, in the East, I'm really conflicted. I would not be surprised if it's Pittsburgh and Florida, or Pittsburgh and the Islanders. Those would be, if you're asking me to get down to 4 or 5 teams, and you might say, well, why Pitt? Well, look at what Pittsburgh. Right now. Well, the other thing is
3 best players.
Yeah, but look at what Pittsburgh's done for years. I mean, they did that with Dan Boswell without Crosby and Malkin and Letang 11 years ago. If you look at the 10-11 regular season, they didn't have those 3 guys for weeks and months, and they've done it. They've done it for Mike Sullivan. I mean, they've won without those guys for years, and that's why it's always tough for me to take Pittsburgh completely out of the equation. Tristan Jarry, he had a tough baptism by fire last year. He did not play well in the postseason. He was soundly outplayed, and that miscue in overtime of, I think it was game 3, if not game 4, that completely turned the series and allowed the Oilers to go right back to the conference final. I think if Jarry plays well, Pittsburgh's going to be a tough out.
Okay, I have 2 more. One hockey question, and then we're going to jump into a quick golf question, Jack. Where do you see the guy that shares the same name as you, Jack Eichel? Where does he go? Colorado. I've seen them pretty hot right now on him. Does Eichel get a trade, or what happens there? What do you think?
Well, that is, I mean, I really don't know. That is so far above my pay grade, and there's so many layers involved in that saga. I certainly would not count out the New York Rangers. I think the Rangers are ready to contend a lot quicker than people realize. They've got a young, exciting team up front. They've got, a potential Norris guy and Adam Fox, and they've got some goaltending. They've got some goaltending. That's just Derek, and I don't know. I mean,
he's good.
I don't think I've seen him play live yet. I still don't think I've seen him. I've seen Georgiev. They've got some goaltending. So I would not count out the Rangers in terms of a Jack Eichel. The curious thing is if Buffalo shockingly stayed in contention, the thought process wouldn't be Buffalo wanting to get Eichel a little bit further away from them than New York. But the Rangers might step up on that deal.
Okay, Jack, do you golf? How much do you golf? Are you a fan of the game? Let's hear it.
I golf more this year than I probably have in the last, I don't know. Geez, it's probably the most I've played golf since certainly before kids and probably even before marriage. My son plays very well. I play poorly. Sorry, my dog is distracting me here.
Good.
But, for as much as I play, you'd think I'd be better. But no, I'm not.
Alrighty. Well, we got, I think, 5 questions here in our segment called Questions from the Gallery, sponsored by Molson Coors. Meet New Vizzy Hard Seltzer with 100 calories per 355 milliliters. This variety pack has something for everyone to enjoy, including pineapple mango, blueberry pomegranate, strawberry kiwi, and black cherry lime flavors. Check them out today. Please drive and drink responsibly all times. All right, Jack. Ready to go?
Yeah, That was a long tagline. I was wondering what was happening there. All good.
We usually cut the commercial there, but our guy's not here today. So, funniest interview you've ever had?
Ooh, boy, funniest interview. Pat Maroon was a blast to interview. Geez, funniest interview. Oh, I had an interview one time. I had asked to speak to Hampus Lindholm in Anaheim, and I just ran into Ryan Getzlaf on his way out, and he was just in a good mood that day. Sometimes, these guys are, in a hurry. Sometimes they're not. Well, that day Ryan Getzlaf was in the mood to chat, but I asked the PR guy to get me Lindholm. So just as I asked kind of my last question to Ryan Getzlaf, like the PR guy, unbeknownst to what was happening, like started dragging me. Hey, Jack, Lindholm's waiting. Like, come on, let's go. And so I was talking to Ryan Getzlaf, and he was finishing his answer, and I just slowly was being pulled like away from him. And finally, Ryan Getzlaf was like, "What's going on here?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't know what So I was caught between a rock and a hard place. That was pretty.
At least
funny.
you didn't say Getzlaf was Lindholm, though.
Yeah, no, a lot of people saw that. That was kind of an embarrassing moment. We had a pretty good time laughing about that.
That's awesome.
Yager one time, kind of was, not really brushing me off, but yeah, brushing me off a little bit. And I finally said, "Hey man, I used to watch you when I was in high school in Pittsburgh, if that means anything." And all of a sudden he turned around, he's like, "Are you trying to say I'm old?" And then he had a big laugh and we chatted. So yeah, that was kind of funny too.
One of our listeners here wants to know your ultimate golf foursome. Who would it be?
Oh boy. Try to give me a heads up next time. Wayne Gretzky would be up there for me. I've had a chance to get to know Wayne, and he's a really nice person. He really is. He has great stories. He is extremely self-effacing. Like everything you've heard about him is absolutely accurate. Just salt of the earth, really, really nice guy. I mean, I don't know what else to say. The game's greatest player is one of its greatest human beings. So Wayne Gretzky would be on that list. I am a huge, huge Cleveland Browns fan. So I would probably I might go with the original Clay Matthews. Chubb's recent. I mean, I go back a ways.
You got him on the fantasy team.
Yeah, I would go back a ways. I probably want the original Clay Matthews in there. And then I still believe, the two greatest athletes in the history of their sports that I think are still going to be the greatest athletes in the history of their sports are Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan in our lifetime. I was born in the States. Basketball was a big part of my life growing up. That dude was the most amazing clutch guy I've ever seen. And he's also the only guy that I went from rooting ardently against to rooting for. He was able to completely flip me. So I would probably, I'd probably have Jordan in there too. That'd be quite an interesting foursome, huh?
It is, Jack, but I gotta say,
Clay Matthews.
I gotta say, to be honest, this is gonna be our 96th episode, I believe, and we ask every guest this question. You are one of 3 now that have not included Tiger Woods.
Yeah, Tiger isn't as interesting to me, to be honest with you.
Fair
he
enough.
Doesn't strike me as a particularly interesting person. He's a hell of a golfer, but you're spending 4.5 hours with these guys. So
Yeah.
I don't find Tiger Woods. Now, maybe if I met him privately, he maybe there's layers to his personality that I don't know about. I think Jordan is pretty nuanced in what I can gather. I know for a fact Wayne is an interesting guy. I mean, he's not a guy you have to talk hockey with to be interested in
knowledge.
what he has
Yeah.
to say. Yeah, he can talk about other subjects, and Clay Matthews just seems like a good old boy. I mean, I think he'd be fun. Him and his sons all have the same length of hair. That they must be fun to party with. So, this is a golfing foursome. This isn't a trip to your local church. I mean, so I'm trying to think of who I'd have the most fun with.
I don't know what you got left, Drew, but
That's a pretty good one. I'm going to jump on here. After you have the pregame pizza in the media lounge, I've been in there. I've seen all the play-by-play guys crushing the pizza before I get to
I don't do it. I don't eat before the game ever.
Really?
Who wants to hear a sleepy full broadcaster? Why? Yeah, never.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
I don't eat after 2:00 on a game day. I want to be hungry and borderline irritable.
Wow, I love it. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. This is why you're great at your job. Okay, post-game beverage then. What are you having? Is it a beer or is it a rye? What are you into?
No. If anything, I might have a Captain and Diet and veg out over. I try to keep the snacks light, but clearly by my appearance, not as light as they should be.
I got a question from Steve Samchuk of Grand Coulee, Saskatchewan. He wants to know, out of all the new Oiler signees that came in this year, who's the one that stood out the most for you?
Zach Hyman.
Hyman?
And then Vogel?
I say Cece. That's mine.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, but it's Hyman by a mile. That dude is everything, everything you'd hope for. And I don't know what that. I don't know whether he'll be as effective in year 7 of this deal, but he is one heck of a hockey player. Like I think the next 5 years, people are going to be absolutely loving that contract. The criticism of it, I never really understood. But, again, from what I can gather, and I haven't really had a chance to, sit and talk with him because it's just a different world in which we live right now. But Zach Hyman seems an engaging personality in the room, off the ice, and a hell of a player on it.
There you go, Steve. Hope you're happy with that answer.
Troy, why don't you ask the second last one? I'll ask the last one, and then we'll let Jack get back to his busy lifestyle.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. Who wins in a celebrity death match? Yourself, Rod Peterson, or Peter Lombardius?
I think it would probably be Lombardius. He's a good friend of mine, but my guess is if it came down to it, he'd probably fight the dirtiest.
We had him on the show
That's
2
for you,
weeks
Peter.
ago.
That's for you.
We had him on 2 weeks ago, and he, without hesitant, Jack Michaels. Right away, Jack
Really?
Michaels. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would take Peter. I would take Peter in that deal. He kills you with a kindness, but I also think in a celebrity death match, he'd kill you.
All right, Jack, last question here for you. I'm not sure if they head out that way at some point. I'm sure they do this year with hockey's kind of back to whatever normal is. But Connor Bedard of the Regina Pats, thoughts on him? Have you seen him on TV yet? I'm sure you've seen clips, but I'm sure they make their way to Edmonton at some point. Thoughts on, they say the next big thing?
Well, I'll tell you this. My partner, I'm going to defer to my broadcast partner on the radio side, Bob Stauffer, on this deal. I think we were on the air the other day, and Connor Bedard was talking about him, and I can't even remember who it was, but it was way up there. I mean, it was whatever comparable it was it Mario? I can't remember, but he said it, and I was like, God, I mean, what? Like, that's how, in other words, Bob rarely goes gaga over a player. He went gaga over McDavid. I mean, he was pumped. He kept telling me the Oilers would win the lottery and get him. And I said, you're ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, the Oilers win McDavid in the lottery. He's gaga about this Bedard. He really is. I mean, I've seen him on video. He looks like a great player. But I see lots of great players. Bob loves this guy. So my guess is he has a chance to be one hell of a player. I I am not the best guy when it comes to, number one, I don't get to see a ton of junior games. And number two, I would never count myself as a guy who looks at a 17-year-old and says, this is what he's going to be at 21, 22. I didn't know Connor McDavid would be this good. I didn't automatically say just because he's, absolutely burning up junior hockey, he's just going to destroy the NHL. I'm not a good enough scout to put one against the other. I think there's enough examples of guys who didn't pan out to be the next biggest thing. It's just not for me to say. But I will tell you, from what I've heard about this guy and from what I've seen, he does look phenomenal.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Jack.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm going to defer to you guys.
Yeah, no, he's definitely good. He's a high-end talent. I mean, we get to watch him here in town.
I haven't seen him in person. I've seen the clips, but again, often clips don't begin to tell the tale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the moral of the story is, if you have a chance to, or anyone listening, check him out.
His highlights are unreal. I mean, I don't dispute that at all.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I usually leave some of those, forecasting and the projections to those who kind of know junior hockey more than I do. I can tell you Bob Stauffer loves this guy. Loves him.
Awesome.
So, Jack, Wednesday night, do we have the pleasure of watching you?
Yeah,
on TV,
I'll be on TV Wednesday. I'll be on TV Wednesday, radio Saturday against Vancouver, and then I'm on TV for the next 5 after that. So, yeah, heavy dose of me on Sportsnet coming.
Do me a favor, if you don't mind, Jack. When you're calling the game on the radio with Reed and Bob, tell Brownie I say hi. Eh?
Great guy.
You know what? Sounds so grouchy all the time.
another guy that I had the privilege of watching when I was a high school kid. Never thought I'd get to work with him. And another guy whose personality and just the way he is far exceeds whatever he was as a hockey player, which was a hell of a player. Mm-hmm. He still should have gotten that 50th. We all know it.
I know.
Jack, a pleasure, man. We appreciate coming on today. We had a lot of fun with this one. Hope we can do it again. And
absolutely,
best of luck to you and the others.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of these days, I'm hoping we wrap up this pandemic soon enough so I can not have to battle with Zoom every single time. With my parents, trust me, there was a delay today. When it's my parents and I trying to link up on a Zoom link, I've got to block out 3 hours for a 15-minute conversation. Between me and my dad's technical incompetence, it's slow going. So I appreciate your patience, and it was nice chatting with you folks.
Appreciate joining the podcast there, Jack.
Take care, Jack.
All right. Take care.